It's the most debated bike on the market. You either love it for its torquey renovation or you hate it for its new aesthetic. But either way, there is no denying that the Himalayan 450 has certainly got lids turning as one of the most anticipated bikes on the market. This one was completely my fault. Hey Sprocketeers, welcome back to the channel. My name is Safi Sprocket and today we are here to talk about the brand new Himalayan 450. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that this is the newest, hottest bike on the market, and there are already a lot of reviews floating around on YouTube already. So, in all essence, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the specs of this bike. And if you guys are really that interested in it, I can publish a separate video on that. But today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a genuine review from my perspective. Now, to give you some context, I am 5'7" and I'm slap bang between the average height of a man and a woman in the UK. I've been riding for around 3 years, but I'm still incredibly new to the trail riding world. Overall, I would generally describe my skill set as a generic motorcyclist with the average skill level that's consistent with the length of time that I have been riding. But I also have ambitions to do a lot more in the future, and possibly the near future. On top of that, I'm pretty lazy regarding motorcycle maintenance, and I don't neglect my bikes, but I will put off giving them a good thorough clean when I can. I can do some basic maintenance tasks, but I am by no means a mechanic. I like a machine that's fairly easy to use. I want something that's intuitive to my needs, but I'm also a mega geek. I love my tech, I love fun gadgets, and I love all things techie, nerdy, and geekery. And so if you feel like you're in the same boat as me, this may just be the most relatable review for you. So without further ado, let's jump in. Onto the bike. The Royal Himalayan is a new model that's hitting dealers in the UK. The bike features a more powerful liquid-cooled engine, increased torque, and also some improved specs. Prices start at £5,750 and increase all the way to £6,300, depending on colours and options and features. Now, for those who are shopping for a bike on a PCP basis, you are looking at a total payment of £7,300. So it's a lot more expensive on finance, which you would expect. Onto engine and maintenance. Now, in terms of the bike itself, the new Himalayan has a Sherpa engine. Now, fun fact, Sherpas are an ethnic group in the Himalayan range. They are known to be nomadic by nature, and they are also known to be expert mountaineers, which is where the nickname for a Sherpa who would guide you up the mountain comes from. And I honestly couldn't think of a more suitable name for this engine. Ultimately, we have a bike suitable for mid-range, mid-weight adventure bike seekers within a budget around 6 to 7 grand. And the potential to exceed expectations and impress riders is definitely there. It is definitely the mountain goer bikes. I also want to point out that this is Royal Enfield's first ever liquid-cooled engine, so it's really cool to see that the company is progressing in just a whole different variety of directions, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the first of many in the future. Let's talk a little bit about the width and the weight and also the height of the bike. The new Himalayan's weight and width are significantly different from the old Himalayan. The machine is a little bit wider and it also has a wet weight of 200 kilograms, but you do get a lot more for the weight. The tank comes in at 15 litres and it also comes equipped with a centre stand underneath. Now, in terms of build quality, the bike is a lot more robust than the previous model and the build quality is a lot better as well. A lot has gone into the bike in terms of weatherproofing, and we also have some newer developments like upper crash bars and also the option for adding lower set crash bars as well as luggage. More accessories are hitting the market, and I'm pretty confident that the aftermarket range for this bike is going to be an absolute space race. Up front on the bike, we do have this little stubby windshield as well with the option to add a larger one. I personally found the windshield on the bike that I was riding was really good. I didn't get any kind of wind feedback, and it was just, the size worked really well for my height as well. Now, you may also notice that the bike has a new TFT display with built-in Google Maps, and to be honest, I really liked this feature, probably more than I should. It was built in collaboration with Google, and it runs an Android APK system, and it's honestly one of the most understated features of this bike. I could generally make an entire bike about how stupidly impressed I am with the circular screen on this bike, but I'm going to try really hard to summarize it without getting carried away. Now, for those of you who aren't techie, every time you buy a device or a gadget and it comes with the ability to connect to the internet, What is going on with that gadget is that the company that sold you the device has a computer that device sends data to. And that little computer tells the device how to operate. And every time one device sends a little packet of data to the company, ultimately the person who is running that computer pays for that data to be transferred. What it means is that for other companies, when it usually requires you to download an app, it usually means that the Wi-Fi feature is only going to work as long as the company pays annual subscription fees to Google and pays for those servers. And this is problematic if a company goes bust. Your Wi-Fi gadgets ultimately won't have servers to connect to. So how exactly did Royal Enfield overcome this? And it was a really simple solution, just by getting Google involved. Now, the built-in screen isn't going to work with other Android apps like Waze or Android Auto because the map function connects solely to Google servers directly from your phone. Google is ultimately covering the vast majority of the cost of that data processing, and ultimately that means that unless Google shuts down, which isn't really going to happen anytime soon, there's never really going to be a scenario where the built-in map feature isn't going to work. And ultimately, Royal Enfield avoids the ability of charging their users more to use the system. Google gets free advertising, and ultimately, whilst I'm not a fan of proprietary systems, you have to admit it's really clever how Royal Enfield have tackled this issue to make sure that this is a feature that is going to work long after any possibility of the company potentially just shutting down. Like, you have to give them props for thinking about that. I'm really, really impressed. Now, there are obviously a lot of criticisms because at the moment, one of the issues with this new feature is that it's relying users to leave their phone unlocked. And this poses two major issues. Firstly, it's going to pose a security risk if your phone gets stolen from your pocket and it's unlocked. You might as well kiss goodbye to your entire identity. Your email's unlocked, your banking is unlocked, your social media is unlocked, and someone could just lift that from your pocket. The other problem is that if you're running an OLED screen device, you are going to end up with screen burn into your phone. So imagine you finish your ride at the end of an 8-hour journey and suddenly you can't remove apps from your screen because it is physically burnt into your OLED device. Now, the reason I'm not particularly worried about this is because whenever new tech gets released, I don't think there's ever been a situation where something has been built and released to the public and bugs haven't cropped up. It's usually the case that when something new gets created, most of the bugs get found out after it hits the market. And I'm very confident after talking to the tech team directly that they are currently working on a patch to fix this. The other thing that's worth bearing in mind as well is that something that they did mention to me was that the app is retrospective. So if you are somebody using an older phone, it will work with an older phone, providing it can still get updates from the Play Store and still download apps from the Play Store. You should be covered. However, lesser phone models don't yet have perfect compatibility. So I think one of the issues I was running was the fact that I was using a Google Pixel phone and not a straight up Android phone. And there was apparently some connectivity issues, but again, chatting with the tech team, they are basically relying on a lot of public feedback and listening and doing a lot of social listening to make sure that they keep patching where the problems are. And so even though the app isn't 100% perfect, I think they are going to get there, relying on feedback given to them by the public. So from a tech perspective, I'm not worried about that at all. I think they'll resolve that. It's a non-issue for me. So on to a few variety of options of the bike and also the comfort of the bike. Now, the Himalayan is equipped with spoked and tube tires and also the option for tubeless spoked wheels, but some options are limited to the type of wheels that you get. But what do you get with the suspension? Well, we do have a front fork, but it is also non-adjustable, but it does allow for 200 millimeters of travel, which again is in keeping with the style of bike. And we also have a preload adjustable single shock absorber at the back. Now, in terms of comfort of the bike, I found it really well suited to my needs, and it's set up for a variety of different riding conditions, making it ultimately a really versatile machine from commuting to trail riding. Now, I loved this bike, and in all honesty, it felt like I was gliding over rocks. It felt a little strange at first because I could visibly see chunks of rock in front of me, and I very rarely actually felt any feedback on the bike. I've ridden some bikes before and I've kind of felt like I've needed a cartilage transplant afterwards in my kneecaps, but the 450 isn't one of them. This bike is super comfortable long distance in a whole variety of different ways. Now, I was really fortunate to have been given the opportunity to take this bike across a variety of different terrains in Sardinia, and I frequently played musical chairs, standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down repeatedly, and the seat was genuinely comfortable. Now, I have relatively small hips, and so I do usually have issues with a lot of bikes where the seat will be digging into my legs over a prolonged period of time, but I didn't have any of those kind of problems with the Himalayan. The other thing that I want to point out as well is that the seat height is adjustable between 805 and 825 millimeters. And it wasn't just the seat that I found comfortable either, it was also the seating position. As I mentioned, I'm 5'7", so I'm slap bang between the middle of the average height for a man and woman in the UK, and riding the bike was just, honestly, it was just utterly perfect for me. Now, something else that I noticed is that the tank also felt fantastic to grip when I was stood up and when I was gripping it with my knees. Now, many people are quickly to compare the new shape negatively to the old Himalayan, and I'm going to be honest, guys, I was one of them. I'll put my hands up. But when you're riding stood up and you're riding down those bumpy trails and you're gripping the tank with your kneecaps, and the rounded tank makes a lot of difference physically to just the enjoyment of riding this bike on trails. Now, the Himalayan is comfortable and fun, and it's suitable for a whole different variety of riders. Riding around the corners and the twisties is really pleasant, and it has decent power across the rev range. It has that ride-by-wire throttle with 4 different riding modes, so we've got performance, rear, ABS, and also eco. There is a vast difference compared to the older 411 model, and the bike has ultimately a more punchy and more lively engine, and it also has a 6-speed gearbox. Now, it was really torquey down low, but it didn't just end there either. It had a lot of power through the rev range. And previously, I'd compared the old 411 to a tractor, but the 450 is just so much different, and it has so much more bite to it. Ultimately, the engine is a workhorse, and the output is just so much more meatier. Overall, we have a more refined machine with much more to offer. Now, for the newbie riders like myself, the bike performs exceptionally well during slow speed controls, which is terrific for new riders, especially me, who still lack the confidence and skill to fly over those trails. Now, I'm still finding my feet in the adventure world, and I'm still really nervous about heading down those trails and going over rocks and bumps, and ultimately they freak me out. But cruising over the larger style rocks, whilst maintaining a speed that made me feel in control, which subsequently was slow, but it also meant that I had a lot of confidence to keep going. And the 450 does really well in this department. And ultimately, this is down to the back brake on this bike. It's really worth its weight in gold, along with the maneuverability of it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people who did have the skill to give this bike a run for its money, and they were soaring. However, I'm not one of those riders. I am a novice when it comes to trail riding, and ultimately this bike is for everyone, whether you want to soar across bumps and lumps or whether you just want to go your 10 miles an hour like me. But it's going to do everything. It's going to chug along for anyone and everyone, and it's going to fly for those who need it. And ultimately, you have a more comfortable, more manageable bike that can handle various road types and accommodate everyone, from the newbies to the speedies. Now, I loved it in terms of riding long distance as well. Now, long distance riding is quickly becoming my bread and butter riding style, and I can usually tell within the first 30 minutes of riding a bike whether it's going to work well for me, because I know exactly what pressure points will put me off. And this is undoubtedly a bike that I could ride into the ground and some. It's a little attention to details in terms of comfort that I mentioned before, but also the things like suspension and vibrations and the overall distractibility of the individual features of the bike that will determine whether I would ride it long distance or not. Now, this is going to be a really strange positive, I guess, but something that really stuck out to me was the fact that there wasn't anything noticeably distracting about this bike. And if I was to say something like nothing stuck out to me about this bike, you'd instantly jump to the idea that this was a negative thing, and it's not, and here's why. But what I mean by this is everything is designed in such a way to encourage your mind to focus on the road ahead rather than to draw your attention to the individual features of the bike. And it's a really tough situation to describe if you haven't ridden it yourself. But when you ride, you'll understand exactly what I mean. And what I mean is, there are some bikes when you ride and you'll flip the indicator and you'll just be like, where is it? or you'll flip it and you'll be conscious of what you're doing. But this bike isn't one of those bikes. Everything in terms of the handlebars to the controls was reasonably ergonomic, and this is 100% a bike that I would buy and use for traveling, no questions about it. On top of that, I think it's more of a versatile machine with the range of tyre options and others in a similar category. Now on the road, the bike has plenty of torque in terms of its mid-range, and it performs really well at high speeds, even in higher gears. On the straights, I'll be honest, sometimes it's a little bit too easy to forget about speeding, and the extra gear really lets you hit those higher speeds without any engine grumbling. And before you know it, you're going a little bit too fast. Now onto the downsides, I have been largely complimentary of this bike, and I'll be honest, I'm a little bit biased because I have become a little bit of a fangirl for the Himalayan in recent years, even with the older model. But every bike has its pros and every bike has its con. The first obvious downside with the bike is, as I mentioned, the app faces a lot of issues. It faces the problem of screen burn, and it faces the problem of security risks. But again, as I mentioned before, I'm pretty confident that this is going to be patched up very, very quickly. It's just a natural progression and lifestyle of a new app. It doesn't really identify all the bugs until it hits the market, and this is why our phones have monthly updates, and this is why all of our devices have monthly security updates. It's how tech works ultimately. Now the other issue is, and this is partly down to 200% the fact that I don't have a lot of skill, but again, this is a review from my side of the fence. So the other problem is that at the start of the day, I was so energized and excited to ride this machine that it didn't really occur to me that it was a relatively top-heavy bike. When the bike moves and you're riding through the day, you don't really feel the weight of the machine. It becomes almost weightless. However, I did find that towards the end of the day, I struggled when I started to get tired, and I started doing those lazy little footsie U-turns, you know, the ones where you like kind of chug along, and honestly, I just didn't have the physical energy to do it when I was exhausted, and it felt really cumbersome trying to pull Laura out of the ditch when her bike went down towards the end of the day. I was just exhausted, and I was trying to work with a top-heavy bike. When I bought my first middleweight touring bike, this is also a transitional period that I also had to go through, which was basically relearning the weight distribution of the machine and learning some new coping strategies. And I think if I was to purchase this bike tomorrow, I think I would have to go through the same transitional period as well, where you have to kind of learn how to maneuver it in a different way compared to other bikes. And I would say this, it is definitely a novice-friendly bike. And again, I don't have a lot of trail riding experience. This is very much my first time going that kind of distance trail riding, especially with a group. And I didn't have any problems whatsoever. But I think if I was going to get this bike and take it trail riding by myself, I think I would definitely spend a good few days practicing putting it down and picking it up again, more so for my own safety, because again, having to pick up that bike when I was tired, I realized that this is probably something I'd want to learn before going out riding by myself. The other thing is as well is that if I was to get like a bike like this, I definitely feel like I would invest in some trail riding lessons. Not because you need them to ride the bike, but I definitely feel like if you have a little bit more skill than what I have right now, I feel like you would definitely get the most out of a bike like this. And I love this bike, it was so much fun, but it definitely felt like it had a lot of room for growth. And I guess in a way that's a little bit inspiring, because I want to be able to kind of use that room for growth to be a better rider. But at the same time, I guess it's a really good pro, because it's a bike that will grow with you if you are a novice like me. So I guess it's a bit of a backhanded con pro. Do I think that this bike is going to sell a lot of units? Yes. Do I think that I would ever consider buying this bike? Yes. I did actually ask them after the test ride if they did do trade-ins, and they seemed interested until I told them they'd have to pick up my other one from Norway. Didn't go down too well. But yeah, no, I think it's a really good bike. I would own one personally. It's definitely suitable for me as a rider. I felt like it was very much targeted to me, and I could see it targeted to a whole variety of different people. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, I've become a little bit of a fangirl, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt. But there we go. That is my review of the Himalayan 450. I loved it, had a great time, would do it again, 10 out of 10. Take what I say with a pinch of salt. Anyway, my name is Safi Sprocket. If you want to see more great bike content, don't forget to hit subscribe. And in the meantime, I'll see you next week.